In our culture, guilt is treated like a disease. It is a dark stain on the soul, a weight in the stomach, a ghost that whispers in our ear during sleepless nights. It is something to be avoided, medicated, or drowned out by the noise of distractions. We see guilt as a system error, a programming flaw in our psyche. We rush to get rid of it, like someone trying to get rid of a fever without ever asking what that fever is trying to tell us. Viktor Frankl invites us to stop, to take a deep breath, and look at this guilt not as an enemy, but as a messenger, often painful, but always meaningful. He asks us to understand the nature of existential guilt, more than a mistake, an opportunity. First, we need to distinguish it from a simple mistake. Spilling a glass of water is a mistake. Arriving late for a meeting because of traffic is a mistake. These are failures of coordination, of logistics. Existential guilt is of a completely different order. It does not belong to the world of doing, but to the world of being. It comes in that moment of piercing clarity, when we realize the distance between the person we were and the person we knew deep down we could have been. It is the pain of a missed opportunity for meaning. It is the awareness that, faced with a situation that called for our courage, we were cowards. Faced with a moment that called for our compassion, we were indifferent. Faced with a truth that needed to be told, we chose silence. Existential guilt is not the suffering of having broken an external rule, but rather of having betrayed an internal law, the law of our own conscience. It is the dissonance between our action and the silent melody of what life was asking of us in that unique and unrepeatable moment. Seen through this lens, guilt ceases to be merely a pathology. It reveals itself as a noble and exclusively human characteristic, since only a free being, aware of his or her potential, can feel guilty for not having fulfilled it. An animal does not feel guilt. A computer does not feel guilt. We do, and this is proof of our spiritual stature. And herein lies the great twist. If guilt is the sign that we have strayed from our path of meaning, then it is also the map that shows us the way back. It is not a perpetual sentence that condemns us to relive our failure, but rather an alarm that sounds to wake us up. It is a sacred opportunity for self-evaluation, for change, and for the promise to act more responsibly in the future. It is life, through this pain, giving us a new chance to become who we really are. Imagine the human being as a statue of immense dignity, of unlimited potential. This statue is our capacity for responsibility. It represents our ability to respond to the questions that life poses to us at every moment. Now, imagine that a light shines on this statue. This light is our freedom, our conscience. Wherever this light shines on this form, a shadow is cast on the ground. This shadow, inevitable, inseparable, is guilt. This is guilt, as the shadow of responsibility, the suffering of not being who we could be. Guilt does not exist in and of itself. It is a side effect, a direct consequence of our most precious asset, our responsible freedom. A wooden puppet does not feel guilt because it is not responsible for the hands that move it. A wild animal does not feel guilt because it follows the dictates of instinct. We feel guilt because at every moment we find ourselves at a crossroads, free to choose one path or another, and because we are free, we are entirely responsible for the direction we take. Guilt, then, is proof that our responsibility is real. It is the testimony of our freedom. A person who boasts that he never feels guilt is not an enlightened being. Most likely, he is someone whose statue of responsibility is so small and atrophied that it barely casts a shadow. Feeling the pain of guilt is a sign of spiritual health. It is evidence that you take your task as a human being seriously. And what exactly is the nature of this pain? It is, as the title suggests, the acute suffering of not being who we could have been. Within each of us, there is a silent image of our best possible version in every situation. Our conscience, our sense organ, whispers to us how that person would act. When, out of fear, selfishness, or indifference, we act in a way that is contrary to this, a chasm opens up between our real self and our potential self. Guilt is the pain we feel when we fall into this chasm. It is the mourning of a possibility of meaning that we ourselves killed. It is the sadness of knowing that life has entrusted us with a canvas and brushes, and we, by our own choice, have painted a picture less than the masterpiece we were capable of creating. That is why it hurts so much. It is not the pain of a broken rule, but the pain of self-betrayal. Imagine that guilt is a sharp physical pain. You touch a hot plate and a searing pain shoots up your arm. What do? There are two possibilities. The first is to freeze, staring at your burned hand, obsessing over the pain, reliving the mistake in your mind, thinking, I am a person who gets burned. My hand is ruined forever. I am a failure. The second possibility is to use the pain as an instant signal to withdraw your hand, learn not to touch hot plates, and take care of the burn so that it can heal. The first attitude is to treat pain as a sentence, the second as a sign. And this is the exact difference between guilt that makes you sick and guilt that teaches you. This is the purpose of guilt, a sign for change, not a life sentence. Treating guilt as a life sentence is the essence of neurosis. It is when we become one with our mistake. The person who betrayed a friend's trust and defines himself as a traitor. The person who committed a selfish act and sees himself as a bad person. He locks himself in the prison of his past, and guilt becomes the jailer that torments him day and night. The mistake is no longer something he did. It is something he is. This is a prison with no hope of parole. Frankl's approach invites us to view guilt in the same way we view physical pain, as a biological alarm system of the soul. Guilt does not arise to torture us, but to alert us. It is the siren that sounds to tell us, attention, you have strayed from your course. You have acted in a way that violates your own deepest values. A course correction is necessary. The purpose of guilt is therefore to galvanize us into action. It presents us with a clear agenda. 1. Look at yourself honestly. Admit your mistake without excuses. 2. Make amends. If possible, ask for forgiveness. Try to repair the damage you caused. 3. Learn the lesson. Understand why you acted that way and what needs to change in your character or behavior. 4. Commit to the future. Make a resolution not to make the same mistake again. When we do this, something magical happens. Guilt, having fulfilled its function of alerting us and setting us on the path to change, begins to dissipate. We do not erase the past, but we redeem it. The mistake we made retroactively becomes the starting point for our growth. Guilt ceases to be the heavy burden that drags us back and becomes the fuel that propels us toward a more conscious and responsible future. Here we come across one of the most difficult and misunderstood tasks of the spiritual life, self-forgiveness. Many see this act as a weakness, a self-indulgence, a way of getting rid of responsibility. How can I forgive myself for something so terrible? We ask. Frankl's philosophy offers us a radically different perspective, showing us that self-forgiveness is not an act of irresponsibility, but rather its opposite. This is self-forgiveness as an act of future responsibility. Imagine a soldier who, through a mistake in battle, has been wounded. The battle continues. His comrades need him, but he refuses to receive treatment. He lies on the ground, staring at his wound, saying, "I deserve this pain. It was my fault. I must stay here and suffer the consequences." Is this soldier being noble, or is he being deeply irresponsible toward the battle that still needs to be fought? The person who refuses to forgive himself is like this soldier. He becomes so fixated on the failure of the past that he becomes unavailable for the demands of the present and the tasks of the future. All his psychic energy is consumed by the vicious cycle of self-accusation and remorse. He cannot love fully, work with dedication, or serve a cause because he is chained to his own ghost. Not forgiving oneself, therefore, is not an act of superior morality. It is a form of selfishness that prevents us from contributing to the world. Forgiving yourself is the mature and responsible act of saying, "I acknowledge my mistake. I have learned my lesson. I grieve for my failure, and precisely because of that, I refuse to allow this failure to paralyze me and prevent me from doing good from now on. I free myself from this chain, not to forget the past, but to be able to honor it with a better future." It's not about paying off the debt, but about stopping charging yourself exorbitant interest. It's about accepting your own human condition, which is the condition of being fallible. It's about treating yourself with the same compassion that a good doctor treats a patient, acknowledging the illness, but focusing on healing and rehabilitation. Self-forgiveness is ultimately a contract you sign with your future self. It's a promise that you won't allow yesterday's mistakes to sabotage tomorrow's possibilities for meaning. It's the final act of cleaning the wound so it can heal and become a source of wisdom rather than a source of perpetual infection. When someone hurts us deeply, our initial reaction is anger, a desire for justice, perhaps even revenge. We want the other person to suffer as we have suffered. If justice is not served or an apology is never forthcoming, this anger can turn sour and turn into something more lasting and corrosive, resentment. And it is with the bricks of resentment that we build a prison around our own soul. This is the prison of resentment. Why not forgiving makes the soul sick? Imagine this prison. The walls are made of the incessant memories of the offense, which you repeat to yourself day after day. The air you breathe is that of bitterness. The water you drink is the poison of hatred, which you prepare yourself in the hope that it will somehow reach your enemy. And the cruelest thing of all, you are not alone in this cell. The image, the ghost of the person who hurt you is chained to you forever. You drag it with you wherever you go, forced to relive the pain, the trauma, the injustice, over and over again. Who is the prisoner here? The person who hurt you may be living his or her life, perhaps even happily, perhaps even having completely forgotten what he or she did. The real prisoner is you. Not forgiving makes the soul sick because resentment is an acid that corrodes the vessel that holds it. It makes us cynical, distrustful. We begin to see the world through the lens of our wound, always expecting the worst from people. It drains our vital energy, which could be used to love, create, and find new meaning. Instead, that energy is spent maintaining the prison walls and watching over our ghost cellmate. The resentful person believes that by not forgiving, he is exercising power. He feels like a judge who holds the other person's fate in his hands, refusing to grant forgiveness. But this is a tragic illusion. The power he exercises is only the power to keep himself in his own misery. Refusal to forgive is not an act of force, it is an admission that the other person still has absolute control over his emotional life. Staying in this prison is a choice, and like every choice, it has a price. The price of resentment is your own freedom, your own peace of mind, your own ability to live fully in the present. We believe that forgiveness is an act of weakness, that it is a gift we give to our aggressor, a certificate that his debt has been paid, that the harm he has done to us has somehow been erased or justified. And because the debt seems unpayable and the harm unjustifiable, we keep the door locked, believing that we are exercising justice, when in fact we are prolonging our own sentence. It is necessary then to understand the revolutionary truth about forgiving the other, an act of personal liberation, not of absolution of error. Forgiveness is not saying what you did is okay. Most of the time, what the other person did is not okay at all. Forgiveness is not even saying, I don't feel the pain anymore. The scar from the wound can remain forever. Forgiveness does not require reconciliation. You can forgive someone and wisely choose to never have that person in your life again. So what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is a sovereign act, and at times a deeply selfish one, in the best sense of the word. It is the act of looking at the chain that binds you to your aggressor, the chain of hatred, bitterness, and incessant memory, and saying, I will no longer carry your burden. I will no longer allow your mistake to define my peace. I will no longer drink this poison. And then with your own strength, with your own will, you break the chain. Forgiveness is an act of soul hygiene. It is you deciding that you will no longer allow the trash of another person's past to contaminate the garden of your present. It is your declaration of emotional independence. The focus of forgiveness is not on the other person. It is on you. It is about your freedom, your peace, your ability to move forward. By forgiving, you are not absolving the other person of their wrongdoing before the universe or justice. You are simply absolving yourself of the task of being their jailer, judge, and victim forever and ever. You are handing over the judgment to a higher authority, be it God, fate, or the law of man itself, and taking back the task that truly belongs to you to live your own life in the most meaningful way possible. It is the final act of saying, your mistake belongs to your past, but my future belongs to me. And as you do so, the cell door opens, the ghost of the abuser dissipates, and you take the first step out into the open air of your own liberated life. Look at the natural world. A stone rolls down a mountain, following the law of gravity. A river flows to the sea, following the contours of the earth. A lioness hunts, following her instinct for hunger. Do we ever blame the stone for crushing a flower? Do we blame the river for flooding a bank? Do we blame the lioness for killing her prey? No, because we understand that they could not have acted otherwise. They are perfect automatons of the laws that govern them. They are not free. And now, look at yourself. You feel hungry, but you can choose to fast. You feel angry, but you can choose to respond calmly. You are confronted with a situation, and within you is the capacity to ponder, to hesitate, and to choose between multiple paths. You are the only creature we know who can say no to your own instincts and conditioning. This capacity is your freedom, and this is where it all begins. This is the principle of freedom as a prerequisite for guilt. Guilt is not a manufacturing defect in human beings. It is a mathematical consequence of their freedom. It is the other side of the same coin. If we were not free to choose what is right, we could not be blamed for choosing what is wrong. If we were not free to create good, we could not be blamed for creating evil. Our capacity for heroism is the same that makes us capable of villainy. We are, as one philosopher put it, condemned to be free. We cannot escape the necessity of choosing. Even the refusal to choose is itself a choice. And because each choice is ours, so is the responsibility for it. Guilt, as we have seen, is the painful echo of an irresponsible choice, a choice that diminished us or the world. So instead of seeing guilt as a mark of our imperfection, we should see it as proof of our greatness. The fact that you can feel guilt is irrefutable evidence that you are not a rock, a river, or a lioness. You are not a puppet of fate or biology. You are a door, an agent, a spiritual being endowed with the terrible and magnificent gift of choice. Freedom is the crown that is placed on our heads the moment we are born as conscious beings. It is a heavy crown, and its weight is called responsibility. The pain we sometimes feel when carrying this crown, the pain when it slips or leans the wrong way, that pain is guilt. It is not a sign of shame, but proof that we are royalty. In the vocabulary of the soul, there are two forms of freedom, and the first, while not the final destination, is an absolutely essential step. It is the freedom that is defined by denial, by removal, by escape. It is freedom from breaking the chains of guilt and resentment. Think of the two great anchors that bind us to the past. The first is the anchor of guilt. It is a chain we have forged ourselves, and it binds us to the ghost of our own mistakes. It pulls us down, forces us to relive our failure, to brood over our inadequacy. It whispers that we are not worthy of moving forward. The second is the anchor of resentment. This chain is forged by someone else's mistake, but we are the ones who hold on to it with all our strength. It binds us to the ghost of our aggressor. It forces us to reopen the wound every day, to relive the injustice. It keeps us anchored in the harbor of bitterness. As long as these two chains are bound within us, there will be no movement. We will be paralyzed, at the mercy of the tides of the past. Freedom from is the conscious and powerful act of will to break these chains. When we practice self-forgiveness, we break the chain of guilt. We don't say the mistake didn't happen. We say, this mistake no longer defines me. Its lesson has been learned, and I refuse to be its prisoner. It is an act of liberation that unchains us from our failed self. When we practice forgiveness toward others, we break the chain of resentment. We do not say that the aggression was just. We say, your action will no longer have power over my inner peace. I refuse to carry the burden of your mistake. I leave you behind. It is an act of liberation that unchains us from the person who hurt us. Achieving freedom from is like stepping out of a dark, noisy dungeon into a quiet, open field. For the first time in a long time, there is no dragging of chains. There are no whispers of ghosts. There is silence. There is space. There is a lightness on the shoulders. This is a moment of immense peace, a spiritual achievement of great magnitude. It is the prerequisite for any new journey. It is the clearing of the ground on which a new house can be built. Freedom from is a liberation, but not a destiny. It is the demolition of the prison, but not the construction of the house. If we remain only in this state of unrestrictedness, we risk falling into a new kind of abyss, the existential void. The question, from what am I free, has been answered. But the most important question of life now emerges, with full force. Free for what? It is the answer to this question that constitutes the summit of the human experience. It is freedom for the ability to live meaningfully and responsibly again. This is positive freedom, creative freedom. It is what we do with the cleared field we have gained. It is our now unencumbered ability to direct ourselves toward the world and to engage with it. Freedom is not an absence, but a presence, the presence of purpose. What are we free for then? We are free to find a task that awaits us in the world, a job to be done, a work to be created. It is the freedom to devote our energy no longer to brooding over the past, but to building something in the present. We are free to love another person. It is the ability to step outside ourselves and dedicate ourselves to the well-being and fulfillment of another human being. Now that our hearts are no longer occupied by resentment, we are free to choose a noble attitude in the face of suffering that cannot be avoided. It is using our freedom to transform pain into sacrifice, limitation into opportunity for growth. At this point, freedom and responsibility, which previously seemed to be concepts in tension, merge and become one. To be truly free is to choose to take on responsibility. The weight of the crown of freedom, which previously caused us the pain of guilt, now becomes the rudder that guides our ship. We do not simply bear the responsibility, we embrace it as the very meaning of our freedom. This is the freedom of the artist before the blank canvas, of the architect before the empty lot, of the lover before the beloved. It is a freedom that does not ask, what can I avoid, but rather what can I create? This is where the journey is complete. The person who has gone through the hell of guilt and the purgatory of forgiveness does not just emerge healed or back where they started. They emerge stronger, more aware, and ultimately freer than ever before. Free not only from their wounds, but free to fulfill their unique and irreplaceable mission in the world. What is this person like? First, she walks with a quiet humility, having accepted her own fallibility. She no longer lives under the tyranny of perfectionism. She knows that making mistakes is an inherent part of being free. So when she fails, she doesn't crumble into self-loathing. Instead, she treats herself with a kind of steady compassion, like a good teacher correcting a beloved student. She looks at the mistake, learns the lesson, and moves on without the crushing weight of toxic shame. She has traded the pursuit of a flawless life for the pursuit of an authentic life. The second, she breathes the air of grace, for she practices forgiveness as a way of life. Forgiveness, for her, is not a dramatic and rare event. It has become a spiritual muscle, a daily practice of soul hygiene. She forgives herself quickly so as not to waste precious time chained to the past. And she forgives others just as readily, not out of naive altruism, but because she understands that resentment is a poison that only harms oneself. She values her own inner peace too much to allow the mistakes of others to rent space in her mind. Finally, and most importantly, she moves with a sense of purpose, for she lives in freedom to the fullest. Having freed herself from the chains of guilt and resentment, she embraces with her whole being the freedom to dedicate herself to something greater than herself. Her daily question is no longer, whose fault is it, or why did this happen to me? But rather, what does life expect of me now? What is the task of this moment? She is present, available, engaged. Her freedom does not manifest itself in the absence of commitments, but in the conscious and joyful choice of her commitments. The integrated human being is not a person without scars. On the contrary, she sees them as the map of her journey, the marks of her learning. She has not forgotten the pain, but transformed it into wisdom. She has not banished the shadow of guilt, but integrated it, learning to dance with it. She is living proof that the purpose of life is not to avoid wounds, but to learn to heal them, and in doing so, to become a healer for herself and perhaps for others. She is the person who is finally at peace with her own story and free to write the next chapter.